Hello, this is a video on how to play the dice game Liar's Dice. It's a very fun dice game, and it has quite a good bit of strategy. And so you can play Liar's Dice with up to 5 players. Um, but what you'll need is 5 dice for each player. Um, you can actually play, I guess, with any number of players, but in this video we'll be playing with 5. Do note that the more players you play with, the more dice you need, and so it's hard depending on how many dice you have, right? If you have a lot of dice, then you'll be able to more easily, I guess, play with a larger number of players. But if you don't have that many dice, you'll have to keep your number of players to a minimum. And so what you'll need are 5 dice per player, and you also need 2 or more players, as well as I guess that's really all you need. 5 dice per player, and 2 or more players. And so the objective of the game is to correctly bet on the amount of dice rolled in a certain number, or correctly challenge a previous player's bet. And so a bet consists of an amount and a number. And so let's say you bet 6 threes. That means the player believes out of all the dice rolled, at least 6 of them are threes. And so this player bet 6 sixes. And so green thinks out of all the dice rolled, there are 6 sixes. Over here, blue. And so here, purple. Purple bet 8 fives. And so he believes that out of all the dice rolled, there are 8 fives. And so a round begins with all players rolling their 5 dice. Players keep their rolls hidden from the other players. And so here you can see my roll here, but I can't see the rolls of the other players, and they can't see my roll. You can only see your own roll. One player opens with an initial bet. After a bet, play moves left clockwise to the next player. And so play just moves clockwise, right? You just bet clockwise like so. This player can challenge the last bet made or increase the bet. And so challenging the bet means that the player believes that there are not as many dice showing the number previously stated. And then increasing the bet can be done in a few ways. A player can increase the amount of a number, or a player can keep the same amount previously stated but increase the number. A player can increase both the amount and the number if wanted. And so note that this player said 8 fives. I could say 9 twos, or I could say 8 sixes, or I could say 9 sixes. So notice in those 3 scenarios, in one of them I increased the number on the dice, in one of them I increased the actual number bet, and in one of them I not only increased the number on the dice, I also increased the actual volume or number of dice bet. And so note that the ones are wild, right? And so the stars are the ones right here. They are wild and would count towards towards the amount of whatever number was stated in the current bet. And so let's say this player bet 8 fives, and I had a 1 here. I don't, but hypothetically, let's just say I did. And so this 1 I had would count towards being a 5. It counts towards whatever the bet is at the time. And so the ones with the stars, in this case in real life, it would just be the regular ones. Those count towards whatever the number on the current bet is. And then once a challenge is made, all dice are revealed. And so what can you do? You can either increase the bet, like I stated, or you can challenge the current bet. And so if you think the person is lying or made an incorrect guess, then you challenge the current bet. If not, you increase the bet. And so in terms of fives, I don't really think that they have that many fives. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say 8 threes. I'm going to go with I'd have to go 9 threes. I could go 8 sixes, right? So you can either increase the number, or a number like the actual number right here, or you could increase the number on the dice. So you can increase the actual total number of dice or the volume of dice, or you can increase the actual number bet on the dice. In this case, what we'll do is we'll say, hey, look at the dice. We have 2 6s here. I'm gonna go with 8 6s here and make that as my bet. I know that I have at least 2 6s, and I'm hoping that other people have some 6s. And so green challenged me. What just happened? Green said, hey, my bet's too high. I challenge. I think yellow's bet is incorrect. My bet was 8. You have to hit at least that number or more in order to have a successful bet. I had an unsuccessful bet. Why? Because I bet 8, but there was only 6 6s on this board. And so that means I had an unsuccessful bet because I bet more than the actual number. And so to have a successful bet, you have to bet less than the actual number. And so since he had a successful challenge, I lose my dice. Let's say he challenged, right? He said, hey, I don't think there's 8 dice that are 6s on the board, but there were 8 or more 6s on the board. That means my bet would be accurate, right? There were 8 or more 6s on the board. Therefore, the player who made the incorrect challenge loses a die. And so if a player makes an incorrect bet, they lose a die. If a player makes an incorrect challenge, they lose a die. The last player with die or dice remaining wins the game. And it's that simple, right? You just go around rolling, increasing the bet or challenging the previous bet. If you if you lose your challenge, you lose a die. If you make an unsuccessful bet, you lose a die. And the last player with die remaining wins. It's literally that simple. Note that a player that gets challenged and doesn't make the bet loses a die, and just like in the last scenario. And the challenging player will lose a die if that player that gets challenged makes or exceeds the bet. And so if I made 8 or more 6s on the board, I would have won the bet, and so the challenging player, in this case green, would have lost a die. Note that once a challenge is made, all dice are revealed, and players count the amount of dice for the number bet plus the wild ones. Going forward, the player that lost a die in the previous round makes the first bet in the new round. Once a player loses all their dice, they are out of the game. The last player with a die or dice wins the game. And so we make the first bet. I'm just going to go with the 1-1. I know there has to be 1-1. And he's going to go with 2 wild ones. He's going to go with 5 ones. So he's going to challenge. And so red was lying. Red was indeed lying, and so that means red loses a die. Right? And so you can see that this is a very, very, very simple game. And so now we have to do and so red bets 1 red die. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to that was 3 1s. I know I have a 1 here. And so I'm gonna go with 4 1s. I'm hoping that one of these guys at least has a 1, so we could have 4 1s. Purple goes with 8 5s. And so it's up to and so blue challenges purple, right? Because he's like, there's no way there's 8 5s. So there were 7. That means purple was lying. Purple loses a die. I note that challenging or betting obviously can only be done by the player after you, right? And so that's just common sense here. But I mean, it's not really common sense, so that's why I had to bring it up, right? You might think, hey, you can interject, but no, it's only the player in the circle after you in the circle, who can make the bet. You are supposed to move clockwise. In this case, we're moving counterclockwise, and so I guess that's just what's happening. but that's just how it is. And so they bet 5 6s, and so we can go with 3 1s. I'm gonna do that. That's a bet that's available to me. 3 1s. Let's go with it. There has to be 3 1s on the board here. And so it's up to my opponent. He makes another bet. He goes with 7 6s. Goes with 8 6s. Red calls him out and challenges, and now we have to count to see if there are 8 6s. There are not, and so that means blue loses a die right there. And so you can sort of see that this is a very, very, very simple game. And so once again, we just keep going. And so now we have 8 4s. And so now what we will do is we will, that's quite a high bet. That's quite a high bet. I'm saying liar. I think green's lying. 7, right? So green was lying, and so green's gonna lose a die right there. Notice how he lost a die. And so it's quite a simple game. Like, you look at this and it's quite a simple game. That's why I love it. It's unique, and anybody can really understand it. And so we'll go ahead and just finish this round here. Green called out a 4 5s. I'm gonna go with 5 5s. This is because I have 1 2 5s here, and I'm hoping green had some 5s. He goes with 6 5s. Blue goes with 7 5s. Note that the more you go, it's riskier because you have to increase the bet, and the higher the bet is, the harder it is to hit that target. So red calls out blue, saying I don't think that there's a 7 5s, but there were. And so since red had a false challenge, red loses a die. And so when you challenge, and it's good that you guys were able to see that right there. When you challenge, you have to be strategic. You have to make a smart challenge, because if you don't, then you'll lose, and you'll lose a die. And so that's 5 5s. And so we can either keep the number the same, going up by 1 on the dice, or we can increase by 1 with any number, any volume really. I'm gonna go with 3 1s. I think that there has to be 3 1s on the board here. And yeah, purple's gonna bet there, so that's good for us. We got 7 6s. Green's gonna call out red and going, hey, I don't think that there's 7 6s on the board. Oh, but there could be. Oh, there were. And so green incorrectly challenged. Green loses a die right there. Now we re-roll again. Red places a bet. Remember, when betting, you can increase the number by 1 with any number, any dice number then, or you can just bet the same number of dice with 1 increase on the actual. Okay, so you can increase the value of the dice by 1, betting the same number of dice, or you can increase the number of dice by 1, betting any value of dice. In this case, the challenge was incorrect, and so red loses another dice. I mean, sorry, yellow's challenge was correct. Red's bet was incorrect, and so yeah, red loses a die. Now red bets that there's 1 2 on the board. Quite a safe bet. Blue bets that there's 1 6. Purple bets that there's 6 5s. I'm gonna bet that there's 4 1s. I have 2 1s right here, and I'm confident that there are 2 more 1s around here on the wheel. And so green's gonna call me out for that. And so good for us, we hit it, right? And so green's gonna end up losing a die. Yeah. And so now we roll again. And so it's quite a simple game, guys, and it's very, very fun. And so you can sort of see the strategy here. Green bets 1, 2. Red bets 2 6s. Blue bets 3 6s. Purple bets 6 6s. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bet 4 4s, 4 1s, I mean. And so you might say, hey, you said that you have to, and let's just go through the counting here. Oh, we might be screwed. Yeah, we were screwed here, and we lost a die. And so let's just talk about that. You might say, hey, I thought you said you either have to increase the value of the dice by 1 and you can bet the same number of dice, or you can increase the number of dice by 1 and bet any value of dice. So then why were you able to bet 4 4s there? You can bet the number of 1s based on the previous number of bets made. Notice that there was a bet here, 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 here. That's 4 bets. And so I can bet 4 wild 1s. You know why you can bet a lower number of 1s? Is because there is no other wild dice to help it. With all the other values, you have to bet a higher value because you have the wild card 1s to help increase the bet there. But with the 1s, you don't have any wild card 1s to help increase the value. So the general rule of thumb is based on the number of bets that have taken place, that's the minimum number of 1s that you can bet. And so if 1, 2 bets have taken place, I can bet. So let's say 1, 2 bets have taken place, I can bet 2 1s. 1, 2, 3 bets have taken place, I can bet 3 1s. Mathematically, this just makes sense if you think about it logically for a second. The 1s aid all the other bets in increasing their value, right? Because they act as a wild card and they follow the value currently being bet, but they cannot aid themselves. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bet 1 4. It actually would have been beneficial for me to bet 2 4s there, just to make it harder for my opponent there. The bet might come back to me super high, and so this was actually bad strategy on my part. That's 4 6s. That's 5 6s. And so let's go with 6 6s here. And I think he's gonna call me out there. Nope, he bet even higher. He bet 7 5s. And I believe red would probably call him out here. Yeah. He's gonna challenge. So how many 5s do we have? We have 4 5s. That's below 7, and so green loses a die there. And green's on their last die. If they lose one more die, they would be out of the game. And so you can sort of see how to play this game. It's quite a fun game. It's very beneficial. And so what we'll do is he bet 3 5s here. And so we'll bet 4 5s then. Blue bet 7 5s. And so red incorrectly called out blue, and so red is going to lose a die. And so now red's on their last life. And so red bet 2 1s. And so we're in the stage where you have to and this is playing with some special rules. So don't just disregard them. But basically, what was called out is you have to bet. Yeah, and so I should have called them out. That was my bad. You have to bet this. You can only have one value of dice to bet, basically. And so just disregard that. That's not really how it is, really. And so what we'll do is we'll bet 1 4 here. And so blue incorrectly called out purple, and so blue is gonna lose a die there. And so how we're playing now is we're only just increasing the value or the number of dice. And so this happens when a singular player with a dice rolls. This is an optional roll. But basically, if a player with a singular die bets, you cannot change the actual value of the dice. You only can increase the number of dice. And so that's why you saw only betting fours, only betting fives. You could not change the actual value on the dice. You simply had to change the number of dice. But that's an optional rule. And so I'm going to go with the fact that there must be two ones. There must be two ones in here. I have 1-1. There's no way somebody else doesn't have one. Well, they could. So purple went with 4 threes. I think blue might call out purple. Yeah, in the challenge. And so, yeah. Blue made an incorrect challenge, and so blue loses a die. And so this is getting really high in terms of the number of bets here. I have to call out green there. I don't think there's going to be 5 sixes. Yeah, there wasn't. And so green loses their last die. Green is out of the game. I'm going to bet 1-5 here. So notice, right? She could bet anything she wanted because I have 2 die. If the optional rule is if a player has 1 die and they bet something, you can only follow that bet. So okay, what just happened there? Once again, that's another optional rule where you can call on yourself. You can put down a bet and you can call on yourself. That way nobody else can call on you. It's basically if you're so sure that the number you bet is correct, you call on yourself. It's called a callsa. And basically what it does is you make everybody flip their dice. If you're correct, good for you. If you're not, you lose a dice. It's very risky, right? And generally you don't want to do it because it's very hard to be completely accurate. I'm going to go with 2 sixes here. And hopefully one of them calls me out here because I do actually have 2 sixes here. And no, they didn't. 3 sixes. He's going to... Okay. And so purple actually lost a die there because there were indeed 3 sixes on the board. We roll our 2 dice again. And so hopefully you can sort of get the gist of it by now. It's quite a simple game. Please do note that now it's up to us, and I'm going to bet 2 twos. I know I can get 2 twos because I have that one wild die right there. Blue's going to go with 3 twos. Purple's gonna call themselves. And so since purple was correct, they actually get a die back. That's an optional rule, and I recommend not playing with it. But basically, if you call on yourself and you're correct, or so you call on yourself and your bet's correct, you either bet you bet the correct number of die, then you gain a die back. In this case, what we're gonna do is we're actually going to. This is very, very risky. I'm gonna go with 3 threes here. Hopefully I don't get called. Purple goes with 3 sixes. Hopefully blue calls out purple. Yeah, that seems way too risky. Oh no, purple actually had 3 sixes there. And so blue loses one. And so it's not looking good. It looks like purple would win this game. But we'll just keep going here. I'm gonna go with no. That was done by me. Oh no. Yeah, I had a 4, so I don't know why I did that. And so I have 1 die left. That's just a wild one. Purple calls me out for lying, but I do indeed have 1-1, and so purple loses a die. I'm going to go with 2 4s here, because if purple bet a 4, they most likely have a 4. And so I'm hoping that purple has a 4. Purple bet 2 6s. I'm hoping blue calls out purple. So blue's trying to go all in here. Blue failed to reach the number they called for, and so they lose their die. And so that's just a last second resort to try to get a die back. Just dismiss that. It's an additional rule. Just focus on the rules I highlighted here. You cannot get that. In a standard game, you cannot add die back into Liar's dice. So she bet 1-4. I'm gonna bet 1-6. 2 6s. This is bad for me. I sort of have to. I think I have to go for a call out here. I'm in a bad spot. So there were 2 6s. And so if I bet 3 6s, well, they would have easily just known. And so that's just really how to play Liar's Dice. It's quite a simple game, and I hope you enjoyed.